Good afternoon, everyone. I, Ankit, on behalf of NEN and Wadhwani Foundation, would like to invite you all for this webinar and also introduce our expert. Freeman Murray is a second generation technology entrepreneur who has been working with internet startups as a volunteer, employee, founder, investor, and mentor for almost 20 years now. He believes the internet revolution belongs to the youth and has been in India for the last 7 years exploring how to help young people here create technology-enabled businesses. He is currently running a program at the startupvillage.in called the StartupSchool, which helps establish first-time entrepreneurs in the habits they'll need to be successful as technology entrepreneurs. Before I hand over the floor to Freeman, a quick note to all our attendees. You will all be on mute. You may ask questions by typing in the panel provided. Our expert will answer the questions after his presentation. Over to you, Mr. Freeman.
Hi everyone. This is my first online webinar, so bear with me as we go through the process of talking through it. Let's skip on to the next slide. Be a cog. So before I even start, really the purpose that I'm trying to communicate here is really about the routine that you need to set up as you sort of move into doing a startup. One of the hardest things for first-time entrepreneurs, especially if they don't really have too much real-world work experience, is just coming up with a solid sort of work ethic. Just figuring out what you need to do on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis to push your ideas forward and make progress. This is what you typically get if you work at a big company for a little while that has a really well-established sort of software development process. And if you're starting out on your own, it can be a little bit challenged to get that routine going. So that's what I'm going to speak to a little bit. Ankit mentioned a little bit, but I'll tell you a little bit more about my background. I studied computer science at the University of California, Santa Cruz in 1993, 4, and when I was there, actually, the web really just launched. Mosaic just came out, and some of my friends in my computer science classes did a startup called Ayuma. It really started out as just a pet project of theirs to put up garage bands on the internet. And it was really sort of the first internet music sort of startup, and it was a really sort of fun time. It was, you know, all college kids. None of us really had any clue what we were doing, but we were all passionate about the space. After that, I joined the Java group at Sun Microsystems. Right when Java was really sort of just coming out, was the big thing in the world. I worked on the Java server there. And then after several years at Sun, I left to do my own startup called Kendara. Kendara made browser plugins that sat inside your browser and would show you information from other databases related to what you were looking at the moment. We raised venture funding from some top-tier VCs in Silicon Valley and built the company and sold it a couple of years later to Excite at Home, which was a large internet cable operator and web portal. I moved to India in 2005, where I did another startup, and then in 2008 worked with the CIIE, the incubation center at IIM Ahmedabad, and helped work with the iAccelerator for the first 2 years. And that was a really great time to really sort of get my feet wet, helping young entrepreneurs get started. I moved to Bangalore in 2009 and set up Jago, which is a big creative art and technology space there. And now I am in Cochin at the Startup Village, trying to set up a program here to help young technology entrepreneurs get started. the people that I'm looking for are, I'm sort of less worried about the skill set that people have at the beginning, and more interested in some of these high order things. Like, are you interested and passionate about mobile and internet technology? Can you communicate well? Do you work hard? Do you work well in a team? There's one other point I didn't put on this slide, which is are you able to take a little bit of time to figure things out and get going? Another way of putting this is that in order to make this happen in the way that I'm presenting it, you may not make a lot of money for several months as you learn the skills you need and refine a business model. And so if you really need to earn money right away, you're better off getting a job. So here's where I want to get into sort of the meat of the presentation. Creating something of value requires persistent, concentrated effort over extended periods of time. The best way of doing this is to establish a fixed routine in which you make consistent forward progress day by day. What I'm really trying to push for here, the title of the talk is Be a Cog in Your Own Machine. It's that you really need to establish these habits, these things that you do sort of every day when you sort of wake up and start work, that you know what you're working on, and you know how to do this in such a way that every day you're pushing forward. The space is huge. There's a lot of opportunity, but in order to really do something of value, you really need to be able to focus and work on it over a prolonged period of time. So what follows here is really sort of a list of activities that I feel that you can do to help you establish this routine of sort of refining your ideas, learning skills, and getting your startup going. So the first thing that I think that people can do regularly until they really have a clear vision of what they're doing is studying other startups. And so you can really be sort of extremely methodical about this process. Just reading TechCrunch and reading VentureBeat and following Hacker News to sort of see what interesting startups are coming out, and then look at them and ask some questions like, what's the problem that they're trying to solve? How do they make money? How do they attract customers? How easy is it to use the website or the mobile application? And can we tell what tools or what platform they use to build the service? Over time, if you do this, you'll start to get a sense of the culture of what it takes to make a successful internet startup, and you'll get a sense of sort of how they look and how they behave, and then it'll start to sort of clue you into sort of what you need to do to get an offering into that mix that will feel sort of rational and fit in the same list on AngelList or TechCrunch as the other ones. So I think this is a really useful activity to do, and it's something that you can do from the very beginning to sort of get started and really acquaint yourself with the landscape. The next thing is learn something. That one of the reasons why I'm really passionate about working with young people to do technology startups is because technology moves fast enough that you sort of always need to be learning. There are always sort of new languages or new frameworks or new standards that are coming out that you need to be able to take advantage of to really be able to create best-of-breed current applications, web services or mobile apps. And so because things are always changing, it's not as much of a drawback being young because you're not attached to a current way of doing things anyway. Right now is especially great because there are some really amazing learning materials online that are available for free from top-tier universities like Stanford and MIT and Harvard. There's another group called Udacity, which is offering really great programming classes, and there's another one called CodeGear. These are really invaluable resources for helping you to start build up the skill set that you need to be able to effectively build these kinds of applications. Another way of going about preparing for doing a startup is to start running through popular open source projects. Increasingly, building a web service or a mobile app is very much a matter of using the appropriate tools and frameworks and fitting them all together to do most of the heavy lifting that goes into making these applications. So the upside is that you don't have to spend as much time writing just the raw code to create a big application as you used to. The downside is that you really need to be familiar with what these projects are and what they can do for you and how they're used. So being really familiar and tracking open source projects is a great activity to help build up your skill set and your profile. Another activity that I want to push people to do extremely regularly is blog and to a lesser degree tweet, but really write extensively about your experience. Especially in the early days, you're not necessarily on a deadline, and because you're not on a deadline, you can take the time to sort of, when you have a problem, when things aren't working the way that you expect, you can figure out what's going on. That each problem that you have is a learning experience, and as you figure them out by doing a bunch of research, you just generated some knowledge that will be useful to the next person who's in your shoes. And so it's a great opportunity to sort of give back into the community by writing about, whatever the problem or idea that you had and how you solved it. And that by doing this consistently over time, you really help to establish yourself as a legitimate, long-standing member of the online community. And so then, as you participate in blogs and online communities, and then you look to sort of putting out your own offering, you'll also have more weight behind that, and more people will be willing to look at what you've done, and you'll be able to sort of engage in a conversation about why you made the decisions that you made. And this will help. This will help sort of get your startup on the map when you're ready to do that. There's another task. It seems kind of obvious, but it's something to play with from fairly early, even before you're necessarily really trying to do your startup. Is just make sure that you get into the habit of actually writing software in a team. It's a problem with computer science education is actually that not enough of the programming that you do in school is team-based, and in the real world almost all software development is team-based. And so there are some tools that you really need to get familiar with, like either Git or Subversion for doing source control management. And that once you set up a code repository, then you sort of can contribute to it, and you'll get a feeling for the process of making contributions, checking them out, testing things, deploying things, and you'll start to feel how it'll feel to do this all the time and to really grow something big. again, I want to emphasize this point of go slow and do things right. Once you're really sort of committed and you have the idea, all kinds of pressures will mount up. You'll have meetings with clients or funding meetings or other kinds of deadlines that really sort of force you to take shortcuts. But in the beginning, when you're first getting started, your focus should really be on sort of establishing the right routine and really going for doing things correctly. And so put extra effort into making your code look good, doing testing, and getting your process right in terms of collaboration and staging and deployment. Start with something simple. You can move on to more complex things later. So I was sort of recommending starting with something where you can just get a win, get a simple sort of like a blog web service up, then go in and start adding new technologies and try to sort of get a feeling of using some of the open source packages that you explored, and then work on doing something cool where your point is really trying to make a demo, make something really exciting, and then you can move on to actually going after a market and coming up with your business model. Another activity that I think is extremely useful for people when they're just getting started is looking at using some of these web services that actually help you make money. I think that it's useful for a variety of reasons. One is that it just gets you experience using existing web applications that are sort of professional top tier, and it'll give you a sense of deep sense of the experience of using a web or mobile app over a long amount of time. It also earns a little bit of money and will get you sort of familiar with a certain category. And there's a number of sort of interesting professional opportunities that may come out of it. In this early stage, what I'm sort of advising is to limit it, however, to something like 1 or 2 days a week, so that you put in consistent effort and really sort of establish yourself and grow, but that avoid the sort of services trap where you sort of sign up to make a website for somebody and then you need to sort of continue maintaining it and doing upgrades and other things. And so the great thing about most of these online tasking applications is that they don't really require, the tasks are short, and so there's no ongoing commitment. Eventually, you'll do less of this and move into focusing more on building something. But this is a good activity to do to sort of keep yourself busy, bring in a little bit of money, get some experience while you're sort of formulating your ideas and learning the skills that you'll need. Lastly, it's really important to emphasize that this is a long journey. That Mark Zuckerberg may have made $1 billion in his first 5 years out of college, but he's definitely the outlier. It's much more common for you're going to spend years getting good. You'll do something. It'll be reasonably successful. You'll do something again. This is a career. It's a lifestyle. The first part of my presentation is really about this focus on sort of getting a really solid work ethic and routine going. At the same time, because you're your own boss as a startup, it's also important to establish a routine in which you are healthy and having fun and hanging out with the people you like and doing things you enjoy. And so really keep in mind the lifestyle aspect of this path, that you don't have a boss. So create a lifestyle in which you're working hard, but also leaves you the space and time to have fun and enjoy your life. Lastly, I just want to give a short plug for the Startup School, which is a program that I'm running at the Startup Village in Cochin. And really what I'm trying to do with the Startup School is basically create an environment to usher people through this transition from being fairly young and maybe not having that much work experience and maybe not having that much super high-end programming experience through a period of refining ideas, developing your software skills, and then moving on eventually to actually having a startup where you know what you're doing every day and you can push that forward. So you can read more about that at startupschool.in, and if you're interested, you can follow this link and apply. Thank you very much. I am open to questions.
Okay, now we'll move on to Q&A session. Our first question is from Mr. Aman Worthy. How to gauge market requirements and what will work? Is there any standard formula?
There's no standard formula. I come from a software engineering perspective, and so where we come from is, so the first thing to do is to think about the market and think about the problem that you're trying to solve, and sort of try to get inside of the head of one of your potential customers. And then from their perspective now, how would they go about solving this problem today, before you exist? What would they type into Google to find out how to do whatever it is that they need to do? So from going through that experience and then trying out sort of other services, you'll get a sense for how painful this process is. Is this working for this person? Are the existing tools solving their problem? And then you sort of have to go a little bit intuitive on sort of imagining how many of these people there are. The next step is to try to sort of reach out. If you can establish relationships, either by blogging or contributing on other blogs, that'll also be useful in terms of sort of establishing a connection with a particular market or industry that you can feel. Once you feel like you think that there's a good chance that there really is an opportunity here, then build a minimum viable product, or MVP, and really just get this minimal thing with the least effort possible up that you can put out that will validate whether or not you're right. And so then people can use that, and they should be able to tell whether or not this is actually solving their problems. So those are some of the steps that you can use to validate your idea.
Our next question is from Mr. Tej. How do you prioritize challenges when you face one every day when running a venture?
Yeah, so this is a really important part in terms of establishing the routine. Some of the things that I like to do are really sort of make sure that you're moving forward, and so you're get in the habit of developing software and doing some research, responding to people, and try not to deviate from that as much as possible. Beyond that, if real sort of extreme things come up, you may have to deal with it. But I try to keep a routine going. In terms of sort of picking sort of like what the priorities are, the things to sort of keep in mind are going for things that will have sort of as measurable an impact as quickly as possible. And so one of the dangers that startups face is spending sort of overthinking things too much, where it's, you're trying to decide about whether or not you should take venture funding or, angel funding or all of these things before you actually really have this problem. And so try to bring back your context to what can you do right now that will have a measurable impact on the product that you're creating or people's experience of it.
Next question is from Mr. Nandan. What can a person do in a situation where he himself is not technically proficient but has an idea that can solve a daily problem? How can he go about making it a reality?
So again, the people that I'm interested in working with are typically fairly young, and my point is that with founders, especially young founders, that you don't really have the luxury of saying you're not a technical person. That all the tools are available to help you become a technical person. And that it's extremely difficult to have a vision and convince somebody else to do it. That you really need to sort of build up the skills to really be able to chase your dream yourself, and that as you do that, other people will sort of tag on. So my advice to non-technical founders, especially young non-technical founders, is to become technical. It will be more valuable for you in the long run than getting an MBA or other things you can do. So buck up. There's great learning materials available online that will help you pick up these skills. Having an idea is a great start because it will give you a context for how to apply the learning. So it's doable. It doesn't take forever. You just need to decide to do it.
Our next question is from Mr. Rohit. How to see the flaw in our idea or plan without risking a lot in terms of our goals?
So some of the things that are easy in terms of time is just getting to know the community. So if you have an idea that is targeting a certain group of people, the more time that you spend interacting with that group of people and being able to talk with them about your idea, the more likely it is that your idea will actually take off. So that's one part. I tend to recommend that people not be shy about sharing their ideas. The odds of people stealing them are smaller than the odds of you not being able to do anything with it. So really, in my opinion, go out, connect with people, talk about ideas, see if people are interested. Going beyond that, there's once you get to the point of actually sort of like making doing it the next step, you can sort of storyboard the idea. So even before you start building your MVP, your minimum viable product, you can just do it in Photoshop. Put it together the way that you sort of imagine it should look if everything worked perfectly. And then you can start showing this to people. And you can run people through that and see whether or not that resonates with people. And lastly, you get the minimum viable product out, which hopefully doesn't take too long, and again gets you another level of feedback about whether or not there are really people who are interested in what you have to sell. So these are the different steps that you can do at different stages that'll get you feedback that should help clue you in to whether or not people are going to want what you're creating and selling.
Question is from Mr. Balaji. I have a prospective employee who is technically not gifted but has a raw intelligence and fits our culture. What would you suggest?
So I'm generally for it in terms of helping people learn. I don't know exactly what the level is, but my experience with these things is that people tend to learn on the job. It's how everybody in the industry, had some basic idea when they came out of school, but really it was their first job where they established the real sort of habits and routines that sort of made them professional programmers. So if they have the time and they're motivated and dedicated and disciplined, I'm all for it. Yeah, I think that it's something that people can pick up. It just takes time and an environment where people are being encouraged to do that.
We have an interesting question from Mr. Tejasvi. What differences you see in tech startup ecosystem in India and other countries in your experience?
So the thing that I'm pushing is I'm pushing for small. I think it's okay to have a small viable online business. The way that the startup scene works in Silicon Valley is that it's all oriented around finding the next Facebook. And so everybody wants to be a part of a billion-dollar startup, and the cost of living is very high, and the amount of money that people invest is very large, and so sort of the whole scene is just supersized. It's like the stakes are always really, really high, and what that leaves behind, in my opinion, is a large number of very viable smaller businesses that may not be billion-dollar companies. And people in Silicon aren't been interested in these kinds of applications. And in my opinion, this is where there's a huge opportunity, especially for younger people, to move in and be able to come up with new applications that that can solve people's problems. People can actually give technical support in a way that people in Silicon Valley can't provide support, and establish a real business. Another part of this is that the fundraising scene in India is extremely difficult, and so part of it is that you can expect that doing something here, it's much more likely that you're going to have to bootstrap your whole company all the way into being a small profitable business. And so, this is more uncommon in Silicon Valley, and I think that it's a perfectly fine ethic. I think it's a perfectly fine scene. It's just very different. So that's sort of what I'm trying to facilitate.
We have one question from Mr. Aman. Did the idea of meeting new people or possible investors scare you? How did you deal with any disappointments that came along the way?
Yeah, it's a very emotional ride. When you do a startup, it feels like all of these meetings with investors, with clients, with employees, they all have this feeling of sort of life and death kinds of weight behind them. And there's no real trick to dealing with it other than to deal with it and get through it. It's sort of normal, and that if you can establish a routine where you're confident in sort of the progress that you're making, the value that you're creating, that there are starting to be customers that like you, then the conversations with potential investors or potential partners, they really start taking on a quality of, this would be a nice to have as opposed to a must have. So that's really sort of the key, is trying to get to the point where you're basically self-sufficient as quickly as possible, so that it doesn't feel like somebody else holds the keys to life and death in their hands, which is just it's a hard place to be.
Mr. Amit wanted to ask, are you open for mentoring startups?
Yeah, I'm running a program at the Startup Village, which is all about mentoring startups. But it's a residential program, and so it has a very specific there's a very specific sort of type of entrepreneur that I'm interested in working with. But you're welcome to apply at startupschool.in/apply, and we can talk about whether or not it works. But again, it's a residential program in Cochin.
Okay, with this answer, we'll conclude our Q&A session now. And thank you very much, Mr. Freeman, for that interesting session. Yeah. Thank you to all our attendees for participating in the webinar. We are glad that the questions kept coming, and please do send in your feedback and suggestions to us at eclub@nenglobal.org. Also, if you found the session interesting, feel free to blog or post about it. The recorded version of the webinar will be available on our website eclub.nenonline.org by tomorrow. We have an advanced course project to process coming up for early stage entrepreneurs in Bangalore. Date is from October 29 to 31st. And please join us for our next webinar on 17th October. And thank you once again, and have a nice evening.
Thank you, everyone.